Hello, my name is Tia, also known as Costume Fiend because I'm both evil and excessively fond of dressing up. I want to get two things out of the way before I babble about leverage some more. The first being that I wanted to reiterate and update my goals. I want to try for at least 2 videos a month. My upload time will still probably be Sundays at 7 p.m. I don't know if people care about thumbnail previews, but maybe I'll do that to indicate if there'll be a video that week or not. The second thing is I'm just gonna do the whole if you want to tip me on my coffee page thing first to get that out of the way. Like I said in my other leverage video, I'm not interested in putting pressure on people because let's be real, we're all broke. But I also do put some effort into these and I make all my own thumbnails and it never hurts to ask because, well, when I say we're all broke, I'm including myself, of course. Anyway, now that that's done, let's move on to the topic at hand. After going through Leverage Season 3 and remembering how many episodes I loved, as well as liking the season long arc, when I started Season 4, I was hit with even more feels and remembered how much I loved this season as well. I also realized at some point I have way more to say than I thought, so I think I'm going to split this into two parts, and kind of like before, I'm going to highlight some of my favorite standout episodes and briefly get into why. In order, I'll list them out this time. There's the season opener, the Long Way Down job, then the Van Gogh job, followed by the Carnival job, the Gravedigger job, the Boiler Room job, the Cross My Heart job, the Queen's Gambit job, the Girls and Boys Night Out jobs episodes. Those were like a two-parter. And then the final two episodes, the radio job and the Last Damn job. Oh, and I'm not going to talk about it, but I do want to give a shout out to The Office job because it's a largely comedic episode and it kind of parodies the mockumentary style of The Office with a Werner Herzog type character at the helm. But yeah, starting with the Long Way Down job, the team is still dealing with the aftermath of the whole Damien Moreau thing, and while most of them think they should lay low, Nate decides to take on a job involving a widow whose husband died on a mountain under suspicious circumstances. This is another episode where it feels like the job is not as interesting to me as the character stuff is, though that doesn't mean that the job was boring. At the end of season 3, Parker told Hardison that she was ready for pretzels, which was her way of indicating she was ready to do more than just their flirting and try dating. This slow burn continues throughout the season, and while I love the OT3, which includes Elliot, I will always have a soft spot for just the Parker Hardison dynamic. It's one of my favorite TV ships of all time, and partly why I realized I needed to talk about this season too. Parker is pretty neurodivergent slash autistic coded to me, and Hardison's patient was just so refreshing to see the first time around, and it's still sweet now. She's also canonically a little bit older than him, which also still feels like a rarity in TV and film. Nothing's really made of their age gap either. Anyway, in this episode, despite her saying she was ready to start opening up, we still see that she's not great at showing affection, and at the beginning of the episode, she doesn't give Hardison a hug before going up the mountain with Elliot, despite the fact that it'll be dangerous because a guy literally died there, and Hardison hates the cold. One of my favorite moments in this episode, as a result of that moment, is the scene between Parker and Elliot when they finally find the body of their client's husband. Parker is insistent that they get the body back to the widow because it's what the others would try to do, but Elliot realizes that will be impossible and tells her that on the team, both of them are capable of doing the hard things that the others can't do, partly because they're able to take their emotions out of the equation. We know that Elliot, in a way, is seeking to redeem himself after committing atrocities in the past, and as a result, he knows the weight of what it means to kill / to have someone die by his hands. He's also alluded to having to survive in some rough conditions, one time with a dead guy handcuffed to his arm. I think in this moment, Parker begins to realize that she could have been the husband on the mountain and she didn't take a chance to be vulnerable and just give Hardison a quick goodbye hug. This will come back a few times later, but what always stuck with me was Elliot pretty much saying that Hardison was the most likely out of all of them to end up freezing to death, trying to do the right thing. Even though Hardison isn't physically there, how much heart he has is a part of this, and it also helps highlight why he and Parker have the potential to work well together. Fast forward, the job ends with them being able to get the widow her husband's final video sent via email, which broadcasts at the base, and that's where the rest of the team was doing the con. The husband's message very clearly touches everyone. I mean, it still gets to me. And one of the highlights of it was him telling his wife not to look for him because she wasn't going to find him on the mountain. He was always going to be with her in her heart. On top of what Parker gets from that, we also saw Nate dealing with the widow throughout the episode and relating to her desperation to find her husband and the truth because of his own loss. Naturally, this prompts Parker to hug Hardison, and yeah, the husband's message also helps take down the Mark because he reveals him to be sketchy and likely responsible for his death. Fun times. Another great season opener to set us up for some of the character arcs, and it sets us up for the season-long story arc with the team noticing bugs in their office space. More on that later, though. Skipping to episode 4, the Van Gogh job, because it has more Parker Hardison goodness. I believe this is the first episode where the cast plays dual roles because their unofficial second client for the episode, played by the actor Danny Glover, spends a lot of it telling a story involving not only the painting at the center of the whole job, but also parts of his life, including a brief romance between him and a wealthy white lady named Dorothy. $0 to whoever guesses who plays who, because it's very obviously the actors playing the younger versions of the interracial couple. It's actually seeing Parker and Hardison together that convinces Danny Glover's character to talk to Parker about the painting. I didn't mention it in the last video, but one thing I think Leverage did well was the fact that it never ignored Hardison's race, and even though it may have missed the mark here and there, given what the show is about and many of its themes, it would have felt weird for them to just take the complete colorblind approach, and this episode explicitly deals with racism. There's a few funny moments sprinkled throughout, and one of my favorites being the running gag of Elliot running into bad guys hired by the bad guys hired Mooks and recognizing them from jobs he did pre-show. In this case, they both pretended to be inspectors to gain access to this lady's house, believed to have some kind of clue. Like the first episode, we end on Parker having a little bit more growth because season 1 Parker would have had a much harder time sitting still and listening to a person talk about their life for hours. Here she gets invested and even cries when she learns that the couple had to split apart, and Glover's character leaves her with the advice to not waste time, which also builds on the season opening's themes. Oh, and brief interlude because I've been focusing so much on Parker and Hardison and will honestly continue to do so, but Nate and Sophie at the end of season 3 started a bit of a friends with benefits type situation, which is also going on in the background. It isn't that I don't find what their characters are going through interesting. To be honest, I just love the others just a little bit more. I'd say Nate's arc this season is about the fact that he's not only embracing the fact that he's a criminal more, but it's also about how it affects his ability to be the team's mastermind and do the right thing. I'll definitely get into that when I go over the Cross My Heart job, but first I gotta get to the carnival job. This is one of the few episodes that gives us some sympathy for the Mark, and the team switches objectives during the final act. It starts up with them setting up one of their usual type of cons, and they end up becoming decorators for the Mark's house. The Mark, who's a widower and has been putting almost all his energy into renovations and repairs, which is implied to have made him a bit crueler, and the reason why he's been neglecting his daughter and letting his housekeeper do most of the work raising her. Nate's able to recognize his hurt because, in spite of the fact that it's his son he lost, there were similar tells. I made a post on Tumblr about a week ago about how the team doesn't mess around when there's children involved, and this episode absolutely highlights that. The Mark ends up pissing off the Russian buyers he stole the client's computer chip for, and once they kidnap his daughter, the team drops the whole charade, and Nate asks the team if anyone has a problem with him changing their priorities to solely rescuing the girl, and no one objects. Elliot, especially, who'd formed a bond with the kid, goes full dad in one of those my daughter got kidnapped movies, and even with a concussion, kicks much ass. Cheesy as it may be, it was very satisfying to see the team do the whole badass slow walk thing after reassuring the girl's father that they will get the job done, period. And spoiler, they do. And the father and the daughter reuniting was very rewarding, despite the fact that we've only known them for less than 40 minutes. Also, for a brief moment of Parker and Hardison in this episode, we see that Hardison is building a robot that at first Parker thinks is meant to replace her since it can crack safes, and Hardison asks her seemingly strange questions about her mood. It is revealed at the end, though, that he was actually building the robot to assist Parker with her work, and once she realizes it's not a threat to her job or their relationship, she declares she loves it and names it Hardy, after Hardison. He objects to this on the grounds that he copyrighted the name Parker 2000, but she's insistent now that she's taken full ownership of it, and in a weirdly sweet way, it's somewhat of a confession. This transitions very nicely to arguably one of the biggest episodes for the Parker-Hardison ship, as well as a dash of the OT3, but also just to show off the team's love for Hardison in general. Hardison, as I said in the other video, is the youngest member of the crew, and the found family dynamic occasionally fills him with the pesky younger sibling role. We see this the most in his relationships with Elliot and Nate, to be honest, though Sophie and Parker do on occasion find themselves a bit at odds with him being a bit more childish at times. Him being the youngest and the hacker gives him a bit of insight on tech that the others don't have, since the show is like from like the early 2000s. It kind of gives the vibes of the whole millennials versus boomers thing at times, completely affectionately. Them emphasizing that friction at the beginning of the episode obviously serves to make the ending more special. That in this episode centers around death. Again, a theme that keeps coming up in this season. Perfectly building on the pilot and the Van Gogh job, we see Parker in a moment of vulnerability ask Sophie about how to open up to people when you know that one day they'll die. We know that Parker has lost a foster brother before in an accident she blamed herself for. Aside from the team and her mentor Archie, she's obviously been keeping her circle very small. She's also clearly talking more about Hardison at this moment. To make it digestible for her, Sophie compares romantic relationships to the rush you feel when you jump off a building, hence why it's called falling in love. Parker clearly takes this into consideration, and much like with the carnival job, the moment Hardison is in danger, all bets are off. The con started off being about tricking a shady funeral director and her two sons who were taking advantage of the grieving, but since it turns out they were also stealing identities to give them to a Mexican drug cartel, things get ironically more deadly, and Hardison, who has previously mentioned being claustrophobic, ends up being buried alive by the cartel members to ensure that Nate and the rest of the team get them the identities they promised the original Mark. They put finding Hardison first and pull out all the stops. They steal some emergency vehicles so they can try to find him based on what sounds he hears, and Parker is the one to help keep Hardison calm while she talks him through being in a close space over the cell phone he was left with to message the team the details of the exchange. They then pull one of my favorite tropes, and in what might possibly be the first moment in the whole series, Parker calls Hardison by his first name, Alec, and tells him that she needs him, as well as pretty much that he's not really allowed to die. Once they finally find him and get him out of the coffin, what comes next is what I'd say partially what solidifies why this ship is everything. Hardison hugs Elliot first, fun fuel for the OT3 with that choice. He then hugs Nate, who, like Parker, doesn't actually get very touchy-feely with anyone beyond Sophie, I guess, technically, which makes that extremely significant. And then he finally hugs his mother, Sophie, and he and Parker exchange a look. Because despite the fact that the man just went through the ordeal of all time, he knows Parker so well and respects her boundaries so much he doesn't just automatically assume he can go up and grab her, and he realizes how much it took out of her to be that vulnerable with him over the phone, so he doesn't push anything. I'm a romance fan for sure, but more than the I love yous and the big damn kiss, it's the moments like this where it feels like the writer really knows these characters and is writing a romance tailored to them rather than just going through the usual cishet romance checklist, and that's to me what makes it so special. The pair's final moment in the episode is him very softly kissing her on the cheek and thanking her for being there for him, which causes her to smile, and that's enough. I forgot to say when I talked about the episode in the early part of the season, but when Parker tells Hardison that they won't have like a normal relationship, he comes back at her with, my Nana used to say that what's normal is whatever works for you. We all work okay. The last bit referring to the whole team, but I think that the normal is whatever works for you is what's at the heart of this pair's dynamic. For them, a cheek kiss in that phone call were other people's dramatic kisses in the rain. Basically, I love them, Your Honor. I will allow you a break in the Parker Hardison mush fest, though, because in a way the next episode serves that purpose as well. It's another more comedic one for me because the team is up against a guy who comes from a long line of notable con artists, so they realize they can't just trick him any old way. The main reason I decided to add this one to my list are as follows. One, because it's revealed to the team that Sophie and Nate are hooking up by the Mark being extremely perceptive, which the team only reacts negatively to because they were lying and less so because of the act itself. Nate and Sophie's weak attempt at denial was lovely. 2, this episode involves a chocolate festival and Sophie pretending to be some kind of chocolate expert, which caused one of the real experts to cry when she outdid her. Poor thing. And 3, it was great to see the team have fun taking jabs at the fact that the man nicknamed himself, something Hardison is at times guilty of when he's the grifter, and 4, just the whole scene with Elliot taking him to Ecuador, including him eating the heart of a snake. it's a great break before we get back to some of the heady hitters and heavy hitters. And yeah, the Cross My Heart job is a heavy hitter. So I think this is also a good stopping point. I'll finish up my season 4 rundown in the next video, but like I said earlier, I realized that I had way more to say than I originally thought, in no small part due to all the Parker Hardison and by extension OT3 moments. If Leverage isn't your jam, I hope you get better soon. But seriously, the next one will probably be the last one for now. Other than that, leave a like if you liked, subscribe for more nerdy rambling, and as always, have a good one.